tell you a little bit about our story, why we built a school, a green school, and then how we built the green school and what it has become. Because I'm an accountant by profession, my husband is investment management, so we are not in education, we don't have a background in it, and we were compelled to build the school. But I'd first like to show you what it looks like. That's a little bit of a glimpse, but you'll see lots of pictures. So we started, and we wanted to build this green school. And I'm sure you've heard a lot from what Michael said, and I can't wait to listen to his recording. But if we are serious about building a green school, we had to create something that was an inspiration to designers, to architects, and we had to create a space that could start to imagine how can we live differently on this planet. So it was quite a big challenge, and since we've opened the school in 2021, we've won national awards, Best Overall Development, Best Greenest Development, Best Development in Class. We've received international recognition, but those are the things on paper. And what we've also experienced is actually that it's possible to quite quickly turn barren land, and look at the little spine of the tunnel, and 2 years later, this is what it looked like. This was the view from our coffee shop, and 2 years later it became this. And also we could create learning opportunities and learning spaces that sort of opened the mind and gave opportunities for different ways of learning and for the kids to engage differently. So the question is, why did we build that? So in 2010, I was an accountant, I was doing management consulting for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I started reading about sustainability. And this whole world opened up because I didn't know much. You know, we worked with different industries and corporations and different business processes and all of that, but nobody was talking about climate change or talking about sustainability. So I started reading everything I could find, watching TED Talks, and one of the TED Talks, but what I was mesmerized about is how is it possible that we've created human systems that are so disconnected from natural systems? How did we get here? How did we not know? In the world around me, all my colleagues and the clients that we worked with, sustainability was not on the agenda yet. And then one of the TED Talks that I watched was John Hardy's one about his green school dream. And they built a school that was, the aim was and the purpose was to educate for sustainability. It was built out of bamboo on the island of Bali. And then I said to my husband, like, when our kids are old enough to remember, so our little one was just born, but when they can remember, we must take some time off. We must go live on this island and have this, crazy little adventure that one day when we're in an old age home that we can talk about. So, maybe we meet some tree huggers and some interesting people along the way, which we did. And then my husband is good at keeping me to task. So 6 years later, the little one was 6, we packed up our lives and we moved to Bali for 6 months. And we attended green school. And we thought it's going to be, just this experience. But what we didn't expect was how serious it was, how much rigor, how much science, evidence-based, was going into to support a structure that the children experienced as joyful learning. And we didn't expect that it would change our perspective of education fundamentally. and that it would set our lives on a completely different path. So I think one of the ways in which I describe Green School is that it feels like you're the beneficiary of an amazing back-end structure. Like it's like a cell phone app. There's a back-end to cell phone apps with technicians working really, really hard, and they're smart. And the front end, you're playing the game. You're just having a fun experience, but the back of it is curated and it is considered. And that is that Green School experience. Like our kids experienced a joyful educational journey. They would, on a Sunday night, they would say, great, tomorrow is Monday, we can go back to school. And we once had a friend whose child got chickenpox, and she was devastated because she's missing school. And school is the funnest place that you can be at. And imagine if we can create like the school experience where as adults, we take great care to make sure that the kids experience a joyful learning environment where they don't even realize that they're learning because we were intentional about it. So at the end of our 6 months in Bali, there was an opportunity to be part of pioneering green schools in different locations. So at that point, it was just Green School in Bali, and then it was Green School New Zealand, Green School South Africa, and hopefully soon Green School in Tulum. And we jumped at it. And the next 3 years, that sort of changed the direction of our lives. It changed everything in our house. And over the next 3 years, there were 3 things that kept on motivating us enough to keep going. And they were identity, sustainability, and community. So for the identity bit, like when we walked onto the Bali campus, there was this sense that you are enough. And it was a strange like feeling because I've never been told that I'm not enough, but I've never experienced like explicitly that you are enough. Because it feels like normally we're subjected to standardized tests, we have to do performance appraisals, we have to do well, but the well is being defined by someone else. And that forces us to live a life where we try to meet someone else's standards. And that comes at the expense of finding our own identity. And how can we live an authentic, purposeful, fulfilling life if we don't understand our own identity and what's important to us? So one day, and I'll never forget this, the grade 5s in assembly in Bali, they were presenting. So they all came onto stage, they had a little piece of paper, they said, this is my name, I am from this country, this is what I love most, this is what I'm scared of most, and this is what I dream of. And as they were talking, I could really sense that this is digested and considered, and it's deeply true for every child. So the one came up and said, I love most of all in the world my dog. And one said, I love my family. And one said, I love video games. And the boy who said video games didn't say it to be cool, he didn't say it to be funny. You could see that despite the criticism that that's going to attract, that was deeply true for him. And then they said what they're most scared of. And the one said, my mama's got cancer and I'm scared that she might die. And one said, we have family in Libya and they've got conflict and we can't get in touch with them. So I'm scared for my family. And through this, I thought, what are mine? Like if anyone would ask me, what do I love most? What am I scared of most? What do I dream of? I'll be able to give a superficial answer. But I can't give a true answer because I don't even ask myself that. And here children had the opportunity to explore their identity in a structured and in a supported way. And what better dream can we have for our children than to walk out of school knowing who they are, knowing what they're passionate about, and what they want to do with their lives. And that doesn't just come at the drop of a hat, that comes through a structured process. So that's identity. The second bit is sustainability. And for me, that has got 2 elements to it. What do we do as the adults in the room? And what do we equip the next generation with? We cannot say, sustainability and climate change is the problem of the next generation. We often hear that. But at the moment, today, we have control over a lot of decisions. So what is it that we do? And we had that opportunity, but it didn't feel like a privilege. It didn't feel like something that we could choose. It felt like a responsibility. We were placed in that school at that point. There was this opportunity. It is our responsibility to build the school. And then how do we equip children? How do they learn? It's almost as if we're on the Titanic. We can either keep on playing music, or we can do our utmost to turn the ship and at the same time get the lifeboats ready and train everybody on the boat on what to do. And that's what we need to do. So that's sustainability. And then the third one is community. So I've got two stories. The one is, one day in assembly, the art teacher was doing a little activity to get all the kids settled in. And so she asked, everybody of you who's helped your parents recycle at the school's recycling center, meow like a cat. And I was quite chuffed because my kids were meowing away. And then she said, everybody of you who have helped your parents not to buy something that's in packaging that cannot be recycled, you roar like a lion. And it's like, I haven't made that connection yet. I was diligently recycling, but I was not refusing to buy things in packaging that can't be recycled. And then I realized that if we surround ourselves with a community of like-minded people with a shared value system, it makes us so much stronger because it brings in more perspectives and more knowledge that helps to lift everything. And then, of course, the opposite happened. We returned home, and a few weeks later, my kids were begging me, Mum, please pack stuff in our lunch boxes that comes in packaging. We are the only ones who get all homemade stuff, and it makes us feel stupid, and you are just a weird mum. And then I realized, as the community can lift something, it can also reduce it. We can either get amplified or shrunk. So if sustainability and identity is important enough, it's not going to work if we do that as a household. We need to build a community so that the message is consistent between what you hear in school, what you hear at home, and what you hear at your friend's house. And that makes it stronger. So those were the three driving forces for us to build the school. And then we returned to South Africa, and it took us a year to find land that had the right zoning, and we learned all kinds of things about land. And then it took us, that was 2018, 2019, we spent like this, designing, planning approvals, and then in 2020, in lockdown year, we built and built and built, and then on the 15th of February, we opened the school. And it felt like after 3 years of designing and building, our kids were finally back in a green school. And that was day one. Because now the baby has been born. Now becomes the real world work. So what I'd love to talk to you about is how do we incorporate sustainability in our school? How do we do that? And what are the different elements and areas of the school that we consider? So firstly, broadly speaking, we look at our physical environment, the operations of the school, our curriculum, our community, and our impact. So when we built the school, we had to choose a sustainability standard, the Green Design and Construction Standard. And our sustainability consultants advised to go for Living Future. And the thing with Living Future is it's so beautifully written. Like it feels you connect with it. It's not a compliance standard. It's like an inspirational standard. You read it and you feel like obviously that is the right way to do it. Because this is the intention. Instead of a world that's merely a less bad version, we ask a simple and profound question. What is good? Like what does that look like and how do we strive for that? So, of course, then it gets broken down into tables and requirements, and basically this standard has prescribed many of our decisions and continue to do. So even beyond the construction phase. So it talks about the selection of land, Like, how do you choose a piece of land, what to consider, how do we treat water, how do we treat electricity, health and happiness, how do we bring that into our campus, and then materials, what do we construct out of, what do we buy in our school, like what are the furniture made of, how do you choose that, and what is it that you ask for. Then equity, how do we allow universal access, and beauty, how do we create a place that's beautiful, that is inspiring when you walk into it. Because so often sustainability is associated with a scarcity mindset. Like, we must use less, we can't use that. And what the living building does is it says, we must build a regenerative living thing. And that gives an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. An abundance mindset is much nicer to live with than a scarcity mindset. So we have to build a regenerative campus, one that's not just zero footprint. So the requirements are, we must create 105% of the energy that we use. We must use less water on our site than what we naturally get. So we get rainfall in winter, and we have to measure how much rain do we get and how much water do we use, and use less so that we contribute to the groundwater system, and whatever stormwater leaves our land goes back into the river, and that we contribute to the natural systems. We had to bring in lots and lots of endemic biodiversity, so that not only we have the privilege of the butterflies and the bees that was suddenly on the soil where previously it was dead, but also that it can spread to the neighbors around us. We have to use more than 50% of our campus for food production. And that is a big ask, because food production, not only does it take up space, but it's labor intensive. Like, now you have to grow the things, and you have to deal with pests, and then you hopefully have to eat them. But it also creates a lot of learning opportunities, which you'll see. And then there was the red list chemicals. So that is a list of ingredients that you cannot use. So we had to check the ingredients of everything that come onto campus. So imagine paint. Imagine phoning the paint shop and ask them, what's the ingredients of your paint? And the galvanizing of steel, and the screed flooring, and the varnish of wood. Everything, we had to look at the ingredient list. And one of the things, for instance, that happened is we got many suppliers we couldn't use because they didn't want to give us the ingredient list, or that, it was too much work. So our screed flooring, they came back with the ingredient list. It's locally manufactured, and there was an ingredient that's on the red list. So we went back to them and said, can you please change the formula or the recipe of your floors, because there's this ingredient that's causing harm. And they're like, oh, we didn't know. Of course, nobody wants to intentionally harm. Like, there's a lot that we don't know. And then they changed their recipe. So now, all the screed floors in warehouses, in shopping centers, all of those don't have that ingredient in anymore. And that was an epic learning moment for us to say that one small piece of knowledge can actually have quite a big impact. Then we had zero waste to landfill, which is a massive undertaking. And it also prescribes things like no smoking on campus. Try to encourage cycling to school. We must look at air quality, natural light coming in, natural ventilation, and all of those have got so many emotional benefits other than just from a green building point of view. So that is our physical environment. So if I can make any suggestion, if you want to make a change in your school for sustainability, choose a standard that inspires you and stick to it. Because if we deviated at all from these requirements, it would have been impossible to go back, because it's hard, and it's hard on everybody. And so being religious about that was actually quite important. Then, how do we live on campus? So my parents used to tell us, if you want someone to do something, don't tell them, show them that your actions speak louder than your words. So this is where the rubber hits the road, is how do we do that? How do we live sustainably with the operational processes of a school? So water, we have our own water treatment plant, our own sewage plant, a borehole, and a river pump. They break. And sometimes they don't work and the pipes burst. And we have to then fix them. and learn how to do that. We have solar panels, inverters, batteries, and a grid connection. The fuses melt. And if the fuses melt, then the power trips off the school. Then you don't have Wi-Fi. You don't have visibility on your security system. That sewage plant is not working anymore, as is the water filtration system. The kitchen shuts down, and the teachers also don't have electricity. That happens more frequent than we would have ever have imagined. So we needed to learn about, how do electrical systems work. And then waste has been the biggest learning curve of everything. How do we recycle? How do we not send anything to landfill? What systems do we need to put in place? And that goes for all the different waste streams that we could have planned for and the ones that we couldn't have imagined. And then, of course, chemicals. So on our red list, we can't use a lot of chemicals. That means you can't use them. You can't use bleach to clean your bathrooms. And you have to constantly find alternatives based on the chemicals. So waste, zero waste to landfill. So initially we analyzed what were the potential waste streams and how are we going to channel them and where are they going to go. Of course, there were lots of surprises that we didn't anticipate. But some things, one of the things that we've learned that works really well is change the place in which you put the waste, because then you change your perception of it. So organic waste doesn't go into a bin, it goes into a wheelbarrow, because we all have a different relationship with a wheelbarrow. And then we don't have bins anywhere on campus. We've got baskets and they're on counter height, because this is something that you look after. It's not something that you throw away. So in our 3-year-old class, we found these posters actually this week. So they say, first we throw our peels into the wheelbarrow. Then we take the wheelbarrow to the compost. We empty the fruit peels into it, and then a week later we collect the compost. But what we do on campus is we've got an entire closed-loop system around food. So like you saw, we've got the space. So the kids plant seeds, they watch their plants grow, they help with pest control, they pick everything, it goes into the kitchen, it appears on the food, they eat it. Everybody, after you've eaten, must take your plate, empty your scraps in a bucket. The bucket goes into the bokashi bin. It stays there for 2 weeks. The bokashi bin goes onto the compost. The compost goes into the garden, and then you start it again. And then this is a closed-loop system, and this is how they can learn about a circular economy, where everything has got a designed next step, and nothing is wasted. Nothing goes away, because there's no away. And what I really dream of is, let me just finish this. So we also make sure that we don't treat this as a punishment to work in the recycling center. We try to not make it gross, because this is something that all of us must actually do every day. And then we try to bring in a little bit of fun.
Down the cardboard, down!
So compacting is still a bit of a challenge. And then this is what it looks like at the end, which is a lovely resource for our kindergarten and primary school to do numbers and graphs and all kinds of activities with. But what I really dream of is, now we've got a closed-loop system for food, what if we create one for plastic? Because we are always going to buy yogurt in containers and milk in milk bottles. But maybe what we can do is create a filament, or build like a filament maker, where we change that plastic into filament, and the filament goes into a 3D printer, and then we can bring out maybe our own range of like Green School Lego made out of yogurt containers or something, but learn about the materiality of the different plastics and how do we design the next step for everything. And then one of the grade 10 boys came to me last week, because like the cardboard, you can imagine aluminium tins. It's also actually you're transporting air if you're taking it to recyclers. So he said he's been worried about this aluminium tins because it takes up a lot of space and it's a lot of air, really. So he took some home, and somehow in their barbecue, he had 30 logs, and he amplified it with a hairdryer, and he managed to up the temperature in their barbecue to the point where the aluminium melted. I don't know how he did that. So he thinks we can melt the aluminium, because then it wouldn't take up so much storage space. But then he also had another idea. What if we turn it into coins? Because we are a cashless system. And then on sport days, we use tickets. But the tickets don't have an endless lifetime. So then we can make our own aluminium coins that we can rather use because we can reuse and reuse and reuse them. And that's the circular economy thinking that comes from exposure to real problems. And I felt like waste has been one of our biggest challenges, but it's also been one of the biggest sources of real learning that has happened and innovation. Then procurement. So schools need to buy stuff all the time. And we look at everything when we buy it. Where is it being manufactured? So that's the carbon footprint of it. What are the ingredients in it? Are they on our red list of ingredients? What is the packaging? What happens at the end of it? Like, can you recycle it? Is there a next step for this thing that you bought? So no red list chemicals, no single-use plastics. And this goes for the ingredients that go to the kitchen, for the foodstuffs we sell in our coffee pot to the parents, for our educational materials, how we manage the garden. Absolutely everything gets checked. So 2 examples. We recently re-looked at whiteboard markers. It takes time because we have to find out what is the ink made out of. Like, what's the recipe of the ink? And then if you take a whiteboard marker apart, there are many different parts in it. Like, can we recycle all of those different parts? And often it comes with a cardboard backing and a plastic on top and some stickers. And what happens, like, if you want to refill it? The refill comes in the same packaging. Could we get ink and then refill it ourselves? But then what is that ink made out of? What about the longevity of it? What about any like eco certifications? Like, what does that mean and how do we choose the best marker? The thing is, once we have a list of 3, we can send that to other schools and they don't have to repeat the same process, which is part of our impact. Another example was nachos is a very popular lunch option for the kids, but the nachos comes in this crinkly plastic that we can't recycle. So we stopped having nachos on the menu because we needed to find nachos chips that doesn't come in crinkly plastic. It took us 8 months to find the real actual manufacturer of the nachos chips, because who's going to do this in the school? Who's going to phone random places and get to the manufacturer of nachos chips? And 8 months later, we had our first buckets of nachos chips being delivered. But what happens is if your procurement mirrors your sustainability vision, is it bring authenticity to the learning that happens. Because we can't teach empathy in the classroom and squash a spider. We can't teach about plastic pollution and then buy plastic stuff and sell it on campus. Then there's a disconnect. Then it means like we say something, but we do something different. We can't do that. We have to have authenticity and we have to be sincere about the things we teach. But it's a constant learning curve. And then also what happens is the look is right. When you walk into green school, it has been so hard not to buy plastic toys because they're cheaper, they're available in like all kinds of different colors, they've got different designs, and they're just available on the market. But we've been religious into not buying them. And even if you say we're not going to buy any plastic, you still end up buying a lot of plastic, even if you because there are sometimes just really no alternatives. But then they're considered. And that is the way in which we live. But then, the what and the how we learn. Because if we create the right physical infrastructure and the right operational processes, this provides the structure for the learning to happen. So we have 2 things, what we learn and how we learn it. And I'll start with how we learn it, because for us, this is really important. So the Green School approach is based on David Sobel's book, Beyond Ecophobia. And really, it's about how do we avoid eco-anxiety? How do we avoid the sense of helplessness and depression that comes with some of these big challenges that we feel as individuals we can't do anything about? So our approach is you start by showing wonder and beauty and fall in love with nature. Just that. So that's what the little ones do. They chase butterflies, they dig in the soil for worms, and you play with nature, and you learn to love it, and you learn to have a connection, a personal connection with nature. Smell the different herbs, work with the soil, have your feet in some mud. And then from grade 1 to 3-ish, we start introducing small challenges that they can control, like the paper in our class. Can we take paper in our class to our recycling center? Yes. Who can do that? Anyone in the class. And this has led to like this level where you have control over it. It's led to some discussions. For instance, my kids were debating, one day we were buying ice cream. Do we get ice cream in a cone or a tub? A cone you can eat. A tub gets thrown away. So don't buy ice cream in a tub. And even as a little child, you have control over that decision. And then we grow it a little bit. So in our middle school, we grow it to campus scale problems. What do we do with the waste on our campus? How can we find alternatives to nachos chips? Because it affects us, we're looking for it, and it's a small enough challenge that we can deal with and control. And then for high school kids, it goes nationally and internationally, because then they are ready. And then they've got a deep sense of connection to nature. They've got a lot of exposure to it, and you don't get to feel as quickly overwhelmed. There was something else to say. And then what we learn about sustainability. So we've got different blocks in our day. We've got proficiency blocks, which is languages, maths, and science. And we try to use examples and case studies where we integrate the academic content with the sustainability examples, but also not all the time. But then we've got interdisciplinary integrated thematic blocks, and there we use a sustainability compass. So one term focuses on the social side, how do people treat each other. One focuses on the environment, one focuses on economics, and one focuses on well-being. And for our middle school and high school learners, that block then also incorporates the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it's very project-based. So if we're doing zero hunger, you can have a history lens on it, you can have a geography lens on it, you can have an economic lens on it, you can have a math lens on it, you can have a biology lens on it. And then you get to understand the topic from a different range of different perspectives. And then we also have events like an Earth Day, and we celebrate different things about the Earth. And we have like sustainable markets, so then the kids can design little products and they can sell them. But in the designing of them, we ask them about what are the ingredients, where are they from, what is the packaging, what are the packaging alternatives, because packaging remains a really hard problem. And then we've got green studies, so all the children have 2 lessons of green studies per week. One where they work outside in the garden and you learn about real life, and one in the classroom where you complement what you've learned outside. And this is, for instance, Earth Day. We had a trashing show, and that was a very cute wolf. And we had pledges. So, and then on our pledges, so our family's pledge last year was that we will not buy anything in polystyrene because polystyrene is not recyclable. That is incredibly hard to do. We couldn't eat chicken for a year because all the chicken comes in polystyrene except rotisserie. That was the only way that we could eat chicken. Also, mushrooms. Mushrooms in South Africa is always in polystyrene. You cannot get mushrooms not in polystyrene. Then we had our grandparents, like sometimes they would bring us a cake. The cake is in polystyrene. And so it was for us to eliminate polystyrene from our household was almost a nightmare, and it's one small thing. But it feels like similar to having the living building guidelines is if we choose one thing and we stick to it, then we get that one thing right, and then we move on to the next one. So this year, our pledge is to make sure that all the glass that we buy gets recycled. It's crazy tricky because we cannot rely on bins in South Africa to be recycled. So any glass that we buy anywhere, we take home. And then from home, we take it to the school because then we know it gets recycled. And then the other big learning has been who learns. So I spoke a lot about community, but then who is this community of people that's learning? So firstly, it was the professional team, because they didn't know about living building. And it was all the engineers, architects, all of them. We had to learn the whole time. Then it's our operational team. How do we deal with zero waste to landfill? How do we deal with all these problems? It's daily learning. And then it's our teachers. Most of our teachers come from a teaching background, not a sustainability background. So how do we learn about how are we supposed to live on the planet? What are the challenges around sustainability? Why do we do certain things the way that we do them at Green School? What is the background to the living building? Like, if there's this requirement in it, why? Where does it come from? Of course, the children, and then our suppliers. They learn from us, like the flooring example. So it feels like what happens is we change the mindset of learning is something that teachers tell kids to do, from learning is really something that we all have to do. Nobody knows how to live sustainably on the planet yet. We are all can contribute to that learning, but we can do that if we're willing to learn, and that also demonstrates lifelong learning in a way that you can never teach, because we demonstrate it as we go along. And then lastly, our impact. So we do physical environment, operations, curriculum, team of learners, and then impact. So all our impact projects, and I'm sure your schools have got impact projects. We've had 3 big projects this far. Well, firstly, we defined like who's the community and who is it that we would like to impact. So starting with the inner circle of the community is the parents, the teachers, and the children. Then actually our suppliers, because we can directly influence them, like the sort of the geography setting up. So we often invite schools to come and visit us, and this one boys' school, they wanted to open a recycling center. So we're like, yes, please come. Let us show you what we've learned. Let us show you how much space we need. Let us give you advice, because we are not in competition with the schools. And they find it quite strange that we are always like, please come, we would love to share you. And we send them information. Like, you can sell your white paper to this company for this much money. You can sell glass if you recycle to this company. Please do it, because this is to all of our benefit. So what happened, for instance, with one of our suppliers is we celebrate Zero Waste Week. And we had an interview with the company that supplies the fresh produce to our kitchen. And we've asked them from the beginning, like, you can't bring fresh produce in packaging. Most that packaging is also polystyrene. So they deliver all the fresh produce without packaging. And then we made a little video and we posted it on social media. And then from our online community were actually other clients of the same supplier who then contacted the supplier and said, but why do you bring our fresh produce in packaging? We also don't want the packaging. You know, you just fill bins with packaging. Just bring us. And that's an impact that we have on suppliers and on promoting some of the learnings that we go through. And then also in terms of impact, like we'd like to speak at conferences and share what we've learned. Like living building is also, I think we're the only school in the world that has done all the living building principles. We include it in a new book. UNESCO is doing a project leading up until COP. I think we've been busy now for 6 or 8 months looking at how do we green curriculums around the world, how do we green teacher training, how do we green communities, and then how do we green infrastructure, and how can we create a standard that can then be available to all countries in the world, where it sort of sets a guideline, you know, and help on how do we do this. So we contribute. We're a small voice, but we have tried a whole lot of things, and we've worked through them. And we also contributed to, so at Dubai Cares is doing the educational summit next to COP this year to help to define, like, what should the agenda be, what should be on it. And then we've got the Green School Trust. So this video was taken last year. There were big floods in Durban. Durban is about a 2-hour flight from where we are, just in terms of distance. And many people lost their lives. Many people lost their homes. I think like hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes because it was just washed away. And we felt compelled to go help. So we took the children in the middle school. Their parents agreed to fly to Durban and to help. And that day we helped to pack 12 tons of food parcels. We helped to clean a beach. We visited community centers, and I'll play a little video of one of the children's reflections on it. And then another project, so that has been one project. Another project has been on sanitary pads, because can you imagine, from a waste stream perspective, what on earth are we going to do with sanitary products? Can't recycle them, can't compost them, can't reuse them. So we did research on what are alternatives. And then we found these reusable pads, but they were sold in the UK. First we found some that's made in Denmark. Then we found these ones that are sold in the UK, only nothing in South Africa. And then we contacted them, and all of this takes a really long time. Turns out they've been manufactured 50 kilometers away from our school and sold in the UK. So then they're not for sale in South Africa. We can't get hold of them. So then we worked with this UK lady, and we could buy them, and then parents of our school donated money, because in South Africa, many underprivileged schools, many thousands, get donated sanitary pads every month, but they're single-use products. And those kids don't have access to reusable products. So then our parents donated money, and we could gift these to girls, but then also said, take one if you're going to use it. Because if you know you're not going to use it, then don't take it. Because if you get a reusable product and you use it once and throw it away, then it doesn't really serve the point. So that was a big project, and it took lots of research time. And then we've got this expo on green cars and homes, and it's basically to show the wider community that things like electric cars, solar panels, inverters, batteries, all of those, it's a movement. Like cars are going to be electric, all of them. And if you see one electric car, because in South Africa it's not that big yet, if you see one electric car, it looks like a small initiative, but it's not a small initiative. It's like a global change that's happening. And by us being the venue for an expo like that, we get to show the public, look, all these different car brands are doing it. And then you feel a little bit less lonely, on this road to sustainability. So I've got a little feedback from one of the girls who went to Durban.
At first, I was a little bit scared, because we've never been in the middle of something like that, something so big, like such a big flood, and I was a little bit scared. But when we went, I just got a huge feeling of fulfillment, because I actually did something to help, and I got to see this. I think we did help a good lot, because we're going to be the adults soon. Well, not very soon, but eventually. And it would be great to start experiencing these things from a young age, to know what the world is really like.
And this speaks to that, how do we equip the youth? Because small things, like if you pack food parcels, you can pack it in a well-organized structure and it goes really well, or it can be a mountain of things and struggle. And how to help if there's been a national disaster like the one in Durban. So this is how we integrate sustainability into everything that we can think of simultaneously. Any questions?